Welcome back to Pop Goes the Stack, the podcast that laughs in the face of seamless integration. I'm Lori MacVittie, your host, and the spoiler, the Seems Always show. We're here today with our co-host, Joel Moses.
Hi, Lori. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And actually, we do. We see each other. It's really
right.
Nice. We're going to start today a series that's talking about some of the impacts to application delivery from inferencing workloads, because they're a real workload and they're different. And today we want to focus on availability, what that means, because of course, app delivery is about performance, availability, and reliability, right? There's that acronym. I won't say it, but it's there. So we wanted to talk about each of these in depth. And to do that, we brought Ken Salchow today to talk about availability. Hi, Ken.
Well, thank you. I am honored to be here. I'm actually humble. I'm actually humbled to think that you believe I still have value.
You know, for historical purposes, you always go for okay.
Did you just call me old? I think you just called me old.
I was trying not to. We're talking about availability today within the context of application delivery. Because this is one of those pieces where new types of workloads change how we view availability. And inference is a new workload type. We discussed that elsewhere. Let's just all agree it is, and things need to change. Agree. That's it. So in the past, and Ken will definitely dive into this, availability was binary.
Right? Ken is the holder of history related to availability.
He is the professor.
Yeah, I lived it, right? Like I was a customer of F5 before I joined F5. And that was back in the era when we were building out some of the first e-commerce sites. And availability back then, in the long before time when dinosaurs roamed the earth. It was totally, was the server on or off? And as we started to grapple with that, then it was, does it actually function? Does it have a TCP/IP stack that's operating, that's responding? Then it evolved to the application. Was the application actually capable of functioning and returning what we expected? I think to your point, I believe, Laura, it's deterministically expected. We knew what the response was supposed to be, so we could verify that. Yeah. But then it started to change. It started to morph a little bit, because now that we could ensure that these systems were operational and responding, then the question came about, well, what do we consider available? Is a 30-second response still available? Is a minute response still available? How do we define that? And I think that's what you get kind of getting at here, which is the definition of these things changes as the technology changes, as we improve and we cover off the minor things. That new things come down the road.
Does the definition change, or are we just having to change what we measure and what we measure against in order to determine availability?
Yeah, and has that definition changed in the era of AI applications and AI inferencing?
I think the definition changes. It's what we consider to be available. If somebody's there, but they're not responding, I guess we were joking earlier about being emotionally there. But I think it's true. Availability, you can go in and see somebody and have a meeting with them every day of the week. But if they're not listening to you, if they're not hearing you, if they're not paying attention to you, are they really available to you or not? And I think that's the definition of how we see availability. And I think it's actually a business decision.
Yeah. It's the first time I've ever felt like AI inferencing systems are just like me, sometimes online, but emotionally unavailable. It is true. I think the old definition is the system up and functioning or responding? And the new definition is the system is up and responding and isn't generating things like a fridge magnet haiku, right? That it's actually generating things that are relevant. And so availability in the era of AI is not only about is it up and is it responding, but also is it still generating things that are useful and have utility to the users that it's responding to, which is a different measure altogether.
Your earlier example of it responding, which from a purely like, is it sending text back? Is it actually still flowing? Right? When you ask it a question about how to what was it? How to fix a printer jam?
Yeah,
What did it
yeah.
respond?
I still have the screenshot of this. A friend had a long conversation going with a chatbot, and over time, the longer the conversation gets, the more the AI attention tends to drift a little bit. And so he asked a question. He just shifted context, and he said, "How do you fix a printer jam?" And the AI system responded, "Learn to deal with uncertainty." Which I suppose is a technically correct way of responding to that, but it is by no means relevant to the task at hand. So again,
Right.
it's one of those things where the measure of a system being available has a lot to do with the utility of the system. Is it still useful or producing useful output? And that's a different measure. So availability is not just response time; it's now response quality.
It has to
The
be
argument could be made.
correctness.
Yeah. So, and I said it was also a business decision. So, I mean, first we have to figure out how do we measure, how do we quantify these things? I love metrics. I'm a big data guy. I love data. And sometimes we can't measure exactly what we want, but we can measure close things and use those as proxies. But first, we have to know how to measure this idea of availability in a new era.
Mm-hmm.
And then it does come down to a business decision. What is the business willing to allow? How off the mark are we going to allow the chatbot to get before we're like, yeah, no, he needs to go in a timeout?
Yeah.
Well, I think
or she.
There. Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
You're welcome, Lori.
Yeah. I think there's two things to availability, and you brought it up earlier, was right. We also measure for performance. If something is really slow, we don't necessarily consider it available anymore because the business has said 30 seconds is too long to wait. So we're going to define performance, right, it's got to be less than that. And even that measure, which is something we can get, right? We routinely measure time to first byte, time to last byte, right? Calculate the latency. We know, we average it. Voila, we know what to do. But even that with inferencing changes because the first byte is not a response. It's a thinking, got it, I'll be right back. It's not the actual response that comes later. Mm-hmm. So we have to even adjust the things that we do know how to measure that are very hard statistics, if you will, and factor that in as well.
Right. And sometimes, the measure of availability is actually just the human perception of availability. A lot of systems will display a please wait or a I'm thinking page. And systems like that may take equally as long as a system that doesn't reply at all until it's got a response ready to go. But the human will always judge the system that gave them some feedback first, even though it was fairly meaningless, over the system that returned something fundamentally later, even though the time is exactly the same. So the perception is a large part of availability in some applications. I also think about, Ken, you mentioned that it also has a set of business qualifications or business acceptance of availability tolerances. Time is one of them, but also I would think that in the era of AI, liability is another. The utility of things that come out of, say, a learning system. You have plenty of experience with learning systems. If the learning system is going off the rails and giving out wrong information, the liability to the business for that could be extreme. So you almost find yourself duty bound to make sure that these systems produce useful output that is at least has some semblance of accuracy, right?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely part of that conversation about what it responds and what the business ramifications are. I mean, delay, not available, delay, or too long of available, wrong information. And yes, there's business impact, and then there's liability.
Right.
Although from a business standpoint, liability is just a business impact, right? I mean, if you do normal risk assessment, it's how much does it cost you to fix it versus how much does it cost to suffer it.
True.
And it's just a mathematical equation. So if the liability is limited, you kind of accept it.
Right.
If it's big, you can mitigate it. You can get insurance. I don't know. Has anybody seen any AI liability insurance out there yet?
Not per se.
No, not yet.
I'm sure someone in the insurance industry is working on that.
Yeah.
Probably rolled up into the cybersecurity insurance at this point, because we lump things like, bias and hallucinations into security. So I'm going to bet it's going to roll into that insurance because, right, we treat it like a security issue. I don't know, risk, security. We have weird categorizations for things sometimes.
Yeah. The historical context that Ken has provided has kind of made me think, if the definition of availability over time, our understanding of how to deliver an application and make sure that it's constantly available, if it changes over time, in the era of AI, it seems to be changing again. And I know it's not done changing. So what do you think is next? What's next for the definition of availability? Is it, is it just accuracy? Is it just reliability?
Well, I think before we address that, I think one of the other things that we have to think about from an availability standpoint is the proliferation of access to AI in general, right? So from an availability standpoint, is a system available if it's only accessible via a computer or versus a phone, rather than embedded into an object or embedded into, another system that you're using? That's another aspect of availability that doesn't count how we treat the inference engine, but it does escalate how we respond to that and changes. If you're sitting on a computer, again, going back to your impressions, Joel, if you're sitting in a computer, I think we almost tend to expect it to take a little longer sometimes. Yeah. Right. Maybe when we're on our phone, we expect instantaneous. If it's embedded into our eyeglasses or a device that we're using to navigate the streets, we need it to be instantaneous. And so how we access the system also changes the availability equation, I think.
Yeah.
And then as far as the future, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
I think I think it will change again as people experiment more with agentic AI. Agentic AI, of course, provides a set of tools that an AI system can use, and if the tools are unavailable for that AI, then the AI lacks certain capabilities. Its capabilities would be limited, and so I think there's maybe a second stage to the availability measure for an AI system.
I don't want to lose Ken's point there about the client, right? How things are accessed, because one of the other things I see inferencing doing is shifting a lot of the application delivery to focus as much on like the client side and the client payload, because that carries a lot of information, a lot of policy, and a lot of clues about how much time it's going to take to process, which impacts availability. So I think that's the other thing it's doing to availability, is shifting it to, we have to consider more variables in more places. And then this idea of like, I don't know, like, what would you call that? Like, client aware availability, it's the time is different. That's something new that people might have to deal with.
Yeah, actually, it's not all that new, Lori. If you think back to the days, if you think back to the days when we were still on dial-up modems and started getting ISDN lines and stuff, being client aware was a big decision factor in whether you applied compression and how you delivered stuff. So those factors don't change. I think they've broadened. And Joel, you're right. The back end agentic AI having the back end services that are feeding that. But again, to me, it's not dissimilar than the things we've done before, right? I mean, when we tested an application for availability, eventually we started doing things like running scripts that allowed us to verify the database was connected on the backside, or that other services were available. So I think Lori's blog post is the big piece here. The big difference here is that we used to know what a response should be.
Now it's something that we have to characterize rather than match.
Yeah, and it's very simple. I mean, I know we've all done this, I'm sure, but you take 3 or 4 different chat LLMs and you ask it the same question, and you ask it the exact same question multiple times. The response is different.
Yeah.
In fact, I have trouble getting it not to change the response when we agree on things.
And well, that becomes a problem, at least right from the perspective of, okay, we do app delivery, And we assume that we have all the tools right in one little package to measure availability. And doing something like checking the semantic veracity or emotional awareness of our LLM requires a lot more. Yeah, I know.
I like
a lot more. I don't know.
You want your LLM to be there for you spiritually as well.
We've crossed the line. We need to.
Indeed.
We need to do something. More coffee, right? But it's not necessarily going to be a package again. And I'm sure Ken will remind us that in the early days, right, as he mentioned, scripts, external systems were often required in order to feed that information to systems that made decisions about load balancing and traffic steering, because they didn't have the information. And we may be right back there right now.
Yeah, synthetic transactions were always the very best of the health checks because it exercises the full system. So when you're posting things and doing a full transaction, Ken's
Observer
right.
syndrome.
Well, this is an extension of things that we've known for a long time. Now, it's not just a synthetic transaction, it's also gauging the context of the things that come back.
Yeah.
And we're not matching it. It's not, okay, did this record apply? It's literally, is this output, as I'm continuously querying the system, is this output drifting too far away from what I consider a baseline? It strikes me that something like an AI red teaming tool would actually be really useful to join with systems that are trying to manage the availability and the veracity or the utility of some of these LLMs. And so I hope we take a look at that.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously, the answer is to have an antagonistic AI evaluate the output. But this brings up another thing that was in that paper that I shared with Lori and made her laugh a bit ago. But and you talked about synthetic transactions are great, but they also add significant load and they affect the availability and the performance of the system. And so now we have that juxtaposition. While we're trying to ensure availability, we're actually affecting potentially availability. And this is actually another conversation I was having with someone the other day about hardware. I don't know how many times in my 25, 26 years at F5 that I've heard that hardware is dead. Nobody needs hardware. And every time they seem to be wrong, but every time things change, it comes up. And this is the problem, right? Which is we create new problems. They're actually, I take that back. They're the same problems. We create new instances of them or new renditions of them. And a lot of times the first response really is apply more hardware. I mean, that's why we're getting all the data centers that are growing up for AI, right? Like the answer, the initial answer is always a bigger hammer.
Well, technology is also, to be fair, technology is also a pendulum swing. We move to certain things based on certain attributes, and then we remember fondly how things used to be that we moved away from, and we begin swinging back towards those. It's just kind of a natural reaction to change. And I think that we're kind of in the middle of that. Now, the interest in hardware is not just a fondness of remembering. It's actually, we need math done at extremely high rates for this particular AI task to work. So the hardware is definitely applicable there. But, there's a reason as an ADC company we haven't divested ourselves of our hardware business, and that's that software eats the world, but it eats a lot faster on capably designed hardware.
What? That pendulum swung way away from the conversation.
That's true. That's true.
So let's swing the pendulum back to let's what are the key learnings?
AI inferencing and I've got a takeaway from this. The takeaway is essentially, left to its own devices, AI inferencing systems, if you use them over a long period of time in a single session, their attention will drift and they'll be a little bit like a toddler that you've given too much sugar. They're going to talk fast, they're going to say nonsense, and they're going to be extremely sure of themselves for no good reason whatsoever. And we have to devise strategies to monitor and maintain the system to produce not only to be available continuously, but to be useful or have utility to the users. Availability has two halves. One is it online? And the other one is it emotionally available? I think that's what I've learned from this.
Ken, what would you leave people with about availability and, what they should be thinking about?
I mean, I think my role here was simply just to remind people that this is not new. This is another comment I was making to someone the other day. Secure, fast, and available. That's what we've always focused on, and it's so fundamental that no matter where that pendulum swings, it applies. It's just we come up with new iterations of it. We come up with new challenges. I look at AI, to me, in its most basic state, it's just another application. Yeah, it's got some differences. It operates differently, and obviously we're exploring some of those differences. But at the end of the day, it's all just the fundamental same thing. Our job is to make these applications available to our customers or the people that use them, and make it so that it's an enjoyable, friction-free experience. The challenges don't, the fundamental problems don't change. The challenges associated with them change.
Yeah.
Nice. And I guess from an enterprise who's like trying to figure out what it means for them, right? You're still going to need to watch for availability. That's still going to be a key measure that you're going to use, a KPI, however you want to, call it. But what that actually measures, the metrics you might gather, and the ways that that's accomplished are going to change if you are going to be running inferencing and you want to keep it fast and secure and available. So those kind of changes are coming, but it's not, to Ken's point, going to be radically different than what you've done before. It's just what you're measuring is going to change, and maybe that definition. But otherwise, job's still the same. Keep things running, right?
Just keep moving.
That's right.
Yeah.
Just keep swimming. Just keep.
Exactly.
Keep going. Just keep going. All right. Well, thanks, Ken. Joel, that's a wrap this week for Pop Goes the Stack. So hey, subscribe so you're first in line when the next shiny thing starts throwing exceptions, because we'll be here to tell you about it.